For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning. A fairly mixed picture once again, quite honestly. Waiting really for the Jackson Hole Symposium to kick off, which it does tomorrow. The chairman of the Fed will be talking on Friday morning. That's when he's due to actually speak. The Shanghai Composite down about 0.75%. Investors are getting slightly restless about China, and we've often discussed this matter. We've often discussed the real estate sector there. It's time. A lot of investors are saying that the Chinese central bank, or rather the government in China, actually needs to end the crisis of confidence amongst home buyers right now, which is causing a lot. Investors are pricing in $130 billion worth of loss on developers' dollar bonds. Electric vehicle maker XPeng down about 12%, reported a quarterly loss. The Nikkei gave up early gains to fall 0.3%. We were talking about Japan yesterday, weren't we? How they're manufacturing, their factories were, or industrial output was falling very gradually. Let's move to the United States, and stocks fell stock futures fell in early morning trade this morning. Investors are waiting for that guidance they're hoping to get from Jerome Powell when he talks finally. The Dow, the Nasdaq, and the S&P declined for a third straight session. Thin trading volumes often happens as in August, really, because a lot of people are away. But basically, everybody's now waiting to hear from Jay Powell to see what he's going to say about the pace of interest rate rises in the United States. The Twitter saga continues. Now, here's an interesting take on it. A former security chief of the company, a chap called Peter Zatko, who was brought in by Jack Dorsey, has been blowing the whistle and saying that the Twitter itself covered up various security fails and also fake accounts. And he's alleging that Twitter violated the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, guidelines on how it ought to be proceeding with its business. He's accusing Twitter basically of deception. He may well be helping Musk's either reversal from where he is right in this $44 billion deal, or in other words, trying to reduce the price. A sad day for Ukraine today. It's Independence Day in Ukraine. It also marks 6 months of the conflict there. According to the UN, nearly 18 million people need aid. Sanctions should be tightened. That's what the Defense Ministry is actually saying. And the UN is continuing to sound the alarm over the situation at Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which again, you'd be probably appreciating that the news. Europe's largest, the UN is demanding a demilitarization of that area. Meanwhile, the US is sending $3 billion more in military aid. I'm going to take you to India just for a moment. They've been rejoicing the fact that they've cut down on inflation, and a billionaire Adani, Gautam Adani, wants to take over the media group NDTV, New Delhi Television. The reason for this is, or rather, don't know what his reason for it is, but why it's important as a news item is that this is one of the few media groups that actually it's very popular indeed, and it's also openly critical of the ruling administration's policies, which is always healthy in a democracy. The EU, right? Let's turn our attention to the EU, and again, not an enormous amount of wisdom about comparing currencies, but the euro hit a new 20-year low on pessimistic economic fears. Germany is definitely on course for a recession this year. The dollar, it was down to, the euro was down to 0.98 of a dollar at one stage. It's about 9.9 this morning. Also showing lack of PMIs and so on, lower demand in the UK as well. We got some flash PMIs in Europe. We also got some in the UK, and supply shortages, labour shortages, and so on. it was over 7 days, August the 12th to the 19th, but it's showing that the economy is close to stagnation, reduced customer demand and business activity at an 18-month low. Two dire warnings about energy bills in the UK. The first one from EDF is warning, EDF, they're based in France, EDF is warning, part of the big six power companies, EDF is warning that half the households in the UK will be facing fuel poverty. And Scottish Power, again, one of the big six, is saying that to shield UK families, it'll cost £100 billion over 2 years to actually shield them. And it may be that the authorities, particularly government, are working toward keeping freezing bills at the current price cap of £1,971. And finally to oil, I mean, again, I won't quote its volatility because it has been fairly choppy trading. But the fact it's relatively cheap is being welcomed by global leaders. They shouldn't really be welcoming it, because what it's actually reflecting is a worldwide drop in demand for oil, which points towards weaker economies. And where it is round about 97 at the moment, it's pretty clear that the producers, of which there are many in the world, would prefer it round about $100 a barrel, but it's been everywhere. It's been up to 140 at one stage, and predictions of maybe $300 a barrel if Western sanctions on Russia caused a large shutdown of the country's oil sector. No signs of that at the moment, but that's where we stand. That is the global view.
Well, Michael, a number of things. The first one, let's start with NDTV, the New Day television, operating three major television channels and websites, that the richest man in Asia, a friend of the Malaysian Prime Minister, now says that he wants, the Indian Prime Minister now says he wants to take over. Okay, is this altruistic? Looks like this is a hostile build. This is an assault on the independence of the media and the freedom of expression, considering that long before now, that particular channel has been under assault by the government. So I don't think it's a thing that we should celebrate. It should be something that should be a source of fear for all of us. And then Green Giants, I think it was The Guardian, or is it the Daily Telegraph this morning, reporting that Green Giants, the ABCD, they're making too much money. And some people are now saying they too should pay windfall tax, as has been the case, as has been recommended, with the oil and gas companies. What do you think of this? And then Najib Razak looks like he's going to go to jail in Malaysia over the One Malaysia Development Fund and his conviction. Now the Apex Court says he should go and serve time, 12 years, and also pay, a fine running into millions of ringgit. What do you think? Is this a big moment, or is this just punishment for his disloyalty to those who made him prime minister in the first place?
I'll leave the Malaysia story to you, because, to be absolutely honest, I don't know a great deal about it, and I think it's one of those things that you just have to watch the developments on. I'd rather, if you don't mind, not particularly comment on that, because it's an area which I know very little about. As far as India is concerned, I did mention, yes, of course, that it is dangerous, isn't it, when these large and rich people start to get hold of the media. I was looking at it as a diversification of the media's power, rather than its concentration in one particular point. I mean, you may well be right. The one thing about India is it's celebrating this morning getting its inflation down, which is all to the good, quite honestly. As far as windfall taxes are concerned, I have my doubts about them. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad idea. It's a fairly populist move. I do feel as though the way to handle this is to turn the screw on these companies and say, look, we want you to invest for the future. We want you to invest for the considerable challenges that are going to be from changing from fossil fuels to greener, more renewable energy. Those costs are going to be enormous. We are going, taxpayers are going to bear a lot of that. And if, I'd rather not just take money, because I don't think that windfall tax, I think they're good to start with, but I feel it's much better to force companies to say, there will be a windfall tax, but what we'd much prefer you to do is invest in the future. And I think that's the way forward. I said this last week as well when we were talking about the energy suppliers and also the energy producers themselves as well. We've seen a lot of this. We've seen a lot of windfall revenues. Now is the time to turn those around into investment for the future. That would be my view.
Okay, Michael, for Twitter, it seems to be pouring, not just raining. From Elon Musk to buy or not to buy, now the whistleblower, Pelta Zatsko, is revelation which uncovered extreme egregious deficiency by Twitter in every area of its mandate, including privacy, digital and physical security, platform integrity. What does this portend for Twitter and its shares?
I think that Twitter obviously felt like a good idea at the time, didn't it? But I think these social media sites now are having to grow up quite significantly, and one of them is being responsible for their conduct. And I think these revelations could be absolutely massive. What it's going to do for Elon Musk, I don't know. He may feel as though he now has the grounds to walk away from the deal, or he may go for a cheaper price. I really don't know. He seems to change his mind day by day. But isn't it ironic that here it is, the social media site from which Elon Musk originally, before he was talking about a possible takeover, seemed to be running his business on Twitter. How strange is that, and how interesting it is that a former security officer is coming forward with this sort of evidence. We shall see. I mean, it's very, very interesting times.
Well, thank you very much, Michael Wilson. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotu Sudiri is already here with us in the studio.
Yes, good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Mr. Ifeni. Good morning to the Malabad Morning Show. Good morning to all our viewers out there. Yes, so very quickly, we begin in North Africa. You know, we're talking yesterday about Egypt and the IMF. Well, according to sources, the IMF wants a unified interest rates in Egypt. What the sources are saying is that the IMF says that Egypt's multiple intervention funds at multiple different interest rates, which include tourism, manufacturing, and so on and so forth, disrupt monetary policy. The sources also say that the IMF wants all these intervention funds to come from one source. That is the Ministry of Finance in Egypt. And they also want it to be a single line item. By it being a single line item, the IMF will be able to understand the costs of what they're calling, according to the sources, subsidized interest rates, which are come at a cost for the Egyptian government. Egypt again applied for this latest loan back in March, and are now in August. In fact, almost into September. This is the latest, episode in them being able to get funding from the IMF. Remember, Egypt is the biggest importer of wheat, and also they've had to face a lot from COVID and the war in Ukraine in respect to higher commodity prices. We move to Eastern Africa, Kenya. The oil marketers are again raising the alarm, saying that subsidy payments are late, and because fuel subsidy payments are late, they could possibly lead to fuel shortages, and that means we could again see what we saw just not too long ago, a few months ago in in Kenya, leading up to the elections, long queues and long delays. So again, Kenya also looking for money from the IMF. IMF wants the subsidies gone. Kenya also has fiscal issues, and so again we might see fuel shortages coming up again if these subsidy payments are not made. Still in Kenya, the two of you extensively talked about the Electoral Offences Commission here in Nigeria. On the left-hand side of your screen is John Githongo. Githongo is a journalist in Kenya. He has stepped forward with a signed affidavit from a whistleblower. It's very interesting how whistleblowers are popping up very conveniently for Elon Musk and now for Odinga. This whistleblower says that they were part of a team, literally called the team, of about 46 to 56 hackers. And these hackers apparently hacked into the IEBC EC, that's the Electoral Commission's database for Kenya, and manipulated the results in favor of Ruto. I talked to a couple lawyers and some folks there. They didn't want to talk publicly, but they said that this is something for the Supreme Court to review. Again, it is causing delays as far as the IMF loan for Kenya, as far as who is going to go forward with a number of economic plans for the nation. So this needs to be sorted out. The Supreme Court is going to determine whether or not this is even admissible evidence and possibly cross-examine this whistleblower quietly. Again, they're on a timeline. They got about 2 weeks to attend to Odinga's petition and then move forward. To South Africa, unemployment fell for the second consecutive quarter in South Africa to 33.9% from 34.5%. I understand trade and the financial sector were the biggest driver of jobs there. Still, it is historically high. The IMF, or was it the World Bank, has projected by the end of the year, South Africa will have an unemployment rate of 35 to 36%, which will be the highest in the world. So joblessness is still very high, still a big problem, still causes a lot of unrest that we've seen in South Africa. Still in South Africa, get this, the South Africa Reserve Bank says that cryptocurrencies should be treated by